Three mountaineers from Colorado managed to survive the greatest catastrophe to ever occur on Alaska's fabled Denali 55 years ago. How did the Colorado men escape that fateful day, and what went wrong? It was an unlikely band of brothers, 12 young men who planned their ultimate high in July 1967 by climbing Alaska's Mount McKinley, known to locals as Denali, the Great one of the world's most popular and deadly mountaineering destinations. The 12-man team had 7 members who were never heard from again. The survivors had to spend the rest of their lives adjusting to their recollections while avoiding responsibility. Was it bad teamwork, bad leadership, or is it simply bad karma? Former Alaska Magazine editor Andy Hall was 5 years old at the time. One of the park rangers who oversaw the rescue effort was his father, who at the time served as the park superintendent for Denali National Park. Hall has made the best progress towards a complete understanding of what transpired by drawing on his recollections and 5 years of investigation involving finding witnesses, locating missing records, and interviewing victims. In his book, Denali's Howl, the deadliest climbing disaster on America's wildest peak, he describes what he learned. 7 of the men never returned from the expedition's deadly encounter with the perfect storm, an Arctic super blizzard that whipped up howling winds surging up to 300 miles an hour and a deadly wind chill that freezes flesh solid within minutes. A white-knuckle story told for the first time in shocking detail in Denali's Howl by Andy Hall, son of Mount McKinley National Park superintendent at the time of the climb. The Athabascan Indians who lived throughout Alaska historically had a healthy respect for the size of Denali, as well as a superstitious horror of even approaching glacial ice. Working a summer job for the Forest Service in 1966, Joe Wilcox, a graduate student at Brigham Young University in Provo, Utah, conceived a plan to climb the big mountain. He mailed out an expedition newsletter soliciting climbers for $300 per person to cover food and gear as well as transportation for the round trip from Seattle to Alaska. When 8 men signed up, Wilcox applied to Mount McKinley National Park for permission to make his climb. The application was met with skepticism. Ranger Art Hayes was concerned about the need for more experience in Wilcox's team and suggested he merge his group with 3 men from Colorado, all highly experienced climbers who also wanted to go to the summit. The 2 groups met and agreed to make the climb together. The trek was approved with some caveats. They had to carry a radio, the 2 groups had to stay together, and the less experienced had to take training courses that might save their lives. All assembled, the Wilcox Expedition, as it was called, drove the Alaska Highway through Canada to Alaska and onto the Denali Highway, a 135-mile-long dirt road that ended at the Alaska Visitor Center, the hub of communications. It was a group of 12 desperate young men at odds with each other over their differences in experience. They did not like climbing together and sometimes refused to talk to each other, but they set out together for their once-in-a-lifetime adventure on June 22, 1967. Denali is roughly near the 63rd parallel north, while Everest is at about 28 degrees north latitude, or about where Walt Disney World is in Florida. Storm systems are more powerful at higher latitudes, moving more quickly, and the air is colder. Denali is situated around 200 miles from the Gulf of Alaska and about 400 miles from the Bering Sea, whereas Everest is positioned in the center of the Asian continent, more than 1,000 miles from the closest significant body of water. Because of this, the mountain is frequently vulnerable to powerful low-pressure systems that are unlike anything else on Earth. These systems produce storms that can develop suddenly, have the potential to be strong and very cold, and can come in succession over the course of a week or longer. Additionally, Denali's extensive geographic relief greatly increases snow accumulation. When a strong wind hits Denali, air is lifted, and the rising air at those altitudes transforms into clouds and snow. A usual 6-inch snowfall quickly grows to a foot, according to Toma. Denali is at the ideal location for perfect storms, he continues. Wilcox, Schlichter, Snyder, and Lewis arrived at their camp at 17,900 feet about 2 hours after leaving the top, where they discovered their 8 comrades getting ready for their summit attempt. The next day, July 15, that squad intended to leave. Schlichter and Snyder were 2 of the most qualified and experienced climbers on the Wilcox trip, so it was not surprising that they reached the summit with the first team. They'd spent 4 years polishing their climbing skills and establishing their friendship on Colorado's 14ers, Washington's 14,410-foot Mount Rainier, and Mexico's 18,491-foot Pico de Orizaba after first meeting in 1963 in a summer civics leadership school. The team's other climbers varied in their levels of expertise and physical fitness. Even though Schlichter and Snyder were the only others who had ever been higher than 15,000 feet, everyone struggled with Denali's high elevations. The climbers encountered extremely challenging and unpredictable weather conditions during their ascent. Severe storms, high winds, and heavy snowfall made the climb increasingly treacherous. The Wilcox expedition awoke on the 17th to cloudy, breezy weather after waiting out bad weather, including 70-mile-an-hour gusts and blowing snow. But the skies cleared as the morning went on. By 1 p.m., the weather was beautiful and nearly cloudless, and the 4 men who had previously reached the summit made plans to descend to their camp at 15,000 feet. They anticipated that the other climbers would begin their ascent 10 to 15 minutes after them. Anshul Schiff, an Indiana native and assistant professor at a college, was suffering from altitude sickness. He chose to join Snyder and Schlichter's group as they descended the mountain, rather than attempt the peak. Around 3 p.m., the second crew finally departed for the summit under the leadership of Jerry Clark, a 31-year-old electrical engineer from Eugene, Oregon, who had previously gone on trips to Antarctica. 6 guys were now climbing to the top after recent college graduate Steve Taylor, 23, decided to stay behind at the high camp due to altitude sickness. At 8:30 p.m., 5 hours later, Clark radioed the rangers at the Alaska Visitor Center to let them know that they were perched high up on the mountain and lost. The team was unable to see the ascent route because of the dense fog that had closed in. In the hopes that the weather might improve, the team camped out for the night. They had minimal food, few sleeping bags, and no tents because they had planned to move swiftly up and down the mountain. Joe Wilcox, the leader, came under intense scrutiny. In addition to lacking the necessary leadership abilities and summiting with the Colorado contingent rather than waiting to climb with members of his original team, he was chastised for being unqualified to lead the trip. Others thought that the tragedy's conclusion would have been different if he had shown better leadership and ordered Steve Taylor and Russell to descend to a lower elevation due to their impaired situations. Snyder and Schlichter have reached similar conclusions regarding what transpired on the mountain over time. Snyder claims that those men failed to take advantage of the favorable conditions on both their and our summit days, which led to the catastrophe. The avalanche resulted in the deaths of 7 members of the expedition, including Joe Wilcox, the leader. 5 climbers miraculously survived, but they were left stranded on the mountain without proper gear, supplies, or shelter. Although the 1967 incident continues to be the deadliest climbing mishap in Denali's history, Schlichter and Snyder have accepted it 50 years after the mission. Schlichter was in Vietnam by the end of 1968, and the pain of that country's war quickly eclipsed what happened to Denali. He had a prosperous career in banking and security after finishing his military career. He presently resides at Castle Rock in a semi-retired state. Snyder is the director at the Remington Carriage Museum, which holds the biggest collection of horse-drawn carriages in North America, and he lives close to Cardston, Alberta. What are your thoughts on this? Let us know in the comment section below. If you liked today's video, then make sure to subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching. See you again soon in another video.